Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we have a couple questions, starting with this one from Widgrin, who asked, "Hey Thor, I am fairly sure this question of mine has been asked before in various ways. Do you think bringing back Star Wars Legends as a separate setting for more standalone movies and possible miniseries with little to no connection to the canon, but each their own as literal legends and stories that the people of the galaxy tells each other? Things like deep space horror stories, larger-than-life personas, the wild, tall tales of Jedis doing stuff that the Force unleashed did or in the comics, and so on. Personally, I have been wanting that for years, if not decades now, well, provided it was all done by at least decently competent people." And in a lot of ways, that already sounds like what Star Wars Visions has done, though obviously those were animated shorts and not theatrical movies or series or anything like that. Not anything that was likely seen by a much wider audience. But I'd actually say they've been some of my personal favorite stories from Disney Star Wars because they're generally rather unique and creative and different and can go over the top without worrying if that's how the Force works or not. And I also don't sit there and have to worry about how any of it will impact the canon. You can just sit back and enjoy some 15-minute Star Wars stories. Though the real key with them, why they work, most of them anyway, there are some that are of course better than others, but the real key is they are generally good in and of themselves. If I didn't know Star Wars, or if they weren't Star Wars stories, I could still watch them and enjoy them and would likely get and appreciate the message behind it because they're well written and well made, independent of whatever facet of Star Wars they're latched onto or are sort of using to help tell their story or to be a setting for. They're just good, basically. And that part you said there at the end of your question, that provided it was all done by at least decently competent people, I think that's the real problem right now. Not that I'm saying anything that isn't too obvious, and not that there aren't some competent people making Star Wars or working at Lucasfilm these days, or that it's been all bad in the Disney era. There are, of course, diamonds in the rough. But overall, Star Wars is just kind of average at best. It's gone from that special event movie that would come out every few years, or every decade or so sometimes. It turned from something that everyone wanted to go and see to mediocre shows on Disney Plus that come out a couple times a year and that virtually no one would care about if they weren't Star Wars. Which, not to get too far away from your question, but I think that's the real problem right now. These shows, the Disney Plus shows, taken out of the context of Star Wars, they're pretty bad or average. Save things like Mando Season 1 and Andor that can stand on their own and also be seen as good Star Wars, in my opinion at least. But a lot of the time, they just take characters with big name recognition, Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, for example, and instead of making the shows be the best they can possibly be because they should know how special these characters are to the fans, they seem to half-ass them because they know people will just watch them because of the names. Basically, somewhere along the way, Star Wars forgot it actually has to be good, or to be good first and foremost. And I know some will argue it's fine today, I'm blowing things out of proportion, but numbers don't lie. The numbers for The Acolyte were bad. People weren't watching that show. The average person is not watching something like The Acolyte. They don't care that much about Star Wars anymore. Because instead of, kind of like you're suggesting, instead of trying to get truly creative with it, instead of doing something that is new and different, and I mean actually new and different, I've seen or heard a lot of people say recently, or a lot of articles talking about, that fans rejected The Acolyte because it was something new and different. But they always failed to say exactly what was new or different about that show, other than it being set in a new time period and not having Skywalkers in it. They think including Cortosis and having Plagueis peek his head out of a cave is somehow adding something fresh and new and different to Star Wars. They also somehow think that the story of a special young person taken to be trained as a Jedi at too old of an age, and eventually feeling like they were betrayed by the Jedi Order and turning on them, all the while being manipulated by a Sith to join the dark side, they somehow think that is original? I mean, I don't know. I don't know why so many keep claiming there was something unique and different about that story, about the story of the Acolyte, when it was kind of like the Walmart brand version of Anakin's fall to the dark side, really. And the only people that really seem to get on board with that show, and yes, you can like it for whatever reason you want, but the ones who seem to really get on board with it, who are signing the petition, are the people who want to ship Osha and Kamir or think awesome lightsaber fights equal awesome Star Wars. Like it is the most important thing and is reason alone to do a second season of a show because there were cool things in it. And as I've argued before, there should always be cool things in Star Wars. That should kind of be standard, right? But anyway, going back to the question now, would Legends movies work where they could just do more or less whatever they want? Go over the top or maybe explore different kind of genres like a horror genre? I mean, maybe, again, if they're good. I think obviously anytime something is good, Star Wars or not, people will watch it, which is what Disney and Lucasfilm have forgotten. That Star Wars also has to be good to get people to watch it. That name doesn't mean what it once did. And I'm sure that most Star Wars fans would be able to, I don't know how you want to put it or call it, but they'd be able to shut the lore part of their brain down, knowing it's not a canon story, and just enjoy it for what it is, or that it is a canon story that is clearly being exaggerated because it's being told in universe as a sort of myth or a legend. Either way, yeah, I think they'd be able to enjoy a non-canon Star Wars horror movie that, I don't know, had a bunch of Sith ghosts break free of some sort of item that was imprisoning them, and they start to haunt a Jedi temple, and the Jedi have to fight them and stop them before they do something to come back to life and wreak havoc across the galaxy once more. Something like that, something that's just fun and scary could work and be enjoyable to sit and watch for a couple hours. Certainly more enjoyable than the majority of shows on Disney Plus have been. Though I think the one sort of problem with this idea, which is something we've talked about quite a bit on this channel lately, would be the what is Star Wars question. Not that I don't think Legends stories could be fun, or do well with fans or the average viewer and all that. Again, if done really, really well, if actually good, people will watch it. But is Star Wars just a setting that you can use to tell whatever type of story you want, including ones that would be, shall we say, fictional or tall tales in universe? Or is it a certain type of story or something else about Star Wars that makes Star Wars what it is? And I know that is a question that a lot of people will have a different take on. And though, again, I think the idea of legend stories could be fun, I think if you leaned too much into it, Star Wars really would just become a brand, or more so than it already is. That all you got to do to make Star Wars is to use something from Star Wars, some small little piece of information or a lightsaber or a Jedi or a Sith, or you just got to set it anywhere in the galaxy and you can call it Star Wars regardless of anything and everything else. And I do think if done too much that it kinda does or maybe would destroy the identity of what it means to be Star Wars or what it once meant to be Star Wars. Yes, I think Star Wars needs to do some new and truly original things. They can lean into a legend story here and there, sure. But if you want Star Wars to be true to what it always has been, it has to, more often than not, work in the confines of the universe that George Lucas created and that others have expanded on as well. The confines of all the lore and all the canon, and have the same sorts of themes or convey the same sorts of message that, again, George Lucas and others once did. But that is just my belief. You can feel free to disagree with it. That then kind of brings us to this question from Jimmy Sengenberger Pro, who asked, "Hey Thor, I certainly agree that the decision to cancel The Acolyte was driven by a business decision, and a good one at that. But if the Rey movie does end up coming out as planned, doesn't that somewhat discount that mindset? I mean, the sequels, relatively speaking, didn't perform very well at the box office and command a smaller segment of the fan base, so sticking with that time frame seems to pose a bit of a risk to Disney Lucasfilm. Why does that movie get a shot in a more success-focused Star Wars world?" And well, I think for one, this is something that Kathleen Kennedy herself is really, really pushing for. As I've said before, for better or worse, her legacy will always be attached to the sequel trilogy and to the character of Rey in particular. And when you take into consideration that apparently, or from what we've heard from insider reports, she wants to go out on a win, it makes sense that she wants that win to be the Rey movie and for it to sort of save the sequels and save her legacy. And perhaps she's convinced Disney that it can be done. Likely she is using the prequels as a sort of example that at first they were quote-unquote hated by everyone, or so always gets said. And now it seems like they are beloved by many, that people either came around to them over the years or had a change of heart after watching the Clone Wars animated series, or the kids of that generation are now all grown up and have a louder voice in the fandom and have bigger pocketbooks, if you will, to spend money on things. and thus get catered to more. And certainly the hope with the Rey movie is to be something that fans watch and enjoy and begins to change their opinion about the character, the time period, and, of course, the sequels in general. And though that's not absolutely impossible, I don't think it's very likely, but it's not impossible, it does have the same problem I was talking about in response to the first question, that it would actually have to be good, really, really, really good. It would actually have to not only do something new and unique, yet keeps the spirit of Star Wars, but it would, again, just have to be a good movie in and of itself that didn't require everybody to know about the sequels or know about this or that. It has to be good. And I'm really not so sure they have the people in place to make that happen. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. Also, if Kennedy does somehow, some way go in the near future, if she is gone from Lucasfilm, keeping in mind her contract is up in October of this year, it is up next month, well, I think the Rey movie would almost certainly go with her. Again, I think this is her last hope for the character and for the time period, and she is the one that has somehow convinced Disney it can work. That it can save the sequels and save that time period and make those movies better and more beloved and more profitable. But again, if she isn't around to see that film happen, if she does somehow get fired or walks away from the company in a month or so, I don't think that film ever happens. As Kathleen Kennedy goes, is how the Rey film goes. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about anything and everything I had to say here, or answer these questions yourself. Tell me what you think. You can also leave a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.